I just want to say one last thank you to everybody, which is to say is that we are thrilled that you're here. We're thrilled that you attended the summit. We are thrilled that you are staying for what is going to be a great panel. It's going to be our last session of the day. Once again, it will have great ideas, talking about innovation, which is in fact, in many ways, the heart and soul not only of what drives the California economy, but California's identity globally. And what I would like to do is just take one moment, if I could, to thank the staff of the Milken Institute, in particular, everyone who worked on this session today. So if you could join me in giving a round of applause to everybody. And also to, in particular, thank the staff of the California Center who worked so well with me and putting together these sessions and a lot of long, hard hours. And so thank you to everybody for here, and thank you to our panelists, and to our session, which is entitled California, the Pioneer, Blazing the Trail of Innovation. And our moderator, who is already and eager to go because she knows this subject so well, is Michal Levram, who is who I'm not butchering your name at all.
You said it beautifully.
All right, good. Who is in fact a senior writer at Fortune. She's based in Silicon Valley, so she interacts with many of the key people who lead the charge in innovation. And she covers the technology industry both in print form and online. She's co-chair of Fortune's Most Powerful Women Next Generation in the Brainstorm Tech Conferences. So she knows conferences. So she clearly knows what she's doing here.
Clearly not.
Yes. So I would like to say thank you to all of you for coming today. Thank you to our panelists who will give us a great panel, and we'll look forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm really going to start. I'll quickly introduce our panelists. So starting with Gil Elbaz, founder and CEO of Factual, David Koenig, Managing Director at Control Group, Brett Johnson, CFO of SpaceX, and last but not least, Peter Marks, Chief Innovation Technology Officer of the City of Los Angeles. Thank you guys all for being here. So I want to start out with kind of a fun question for all of you. How many of you have seen HBO's Silicon Valley? Raise your hand. Not many. I thought in LA there'd be a lot more hands up. Well, it's really, if you want to see an accurate portrayal of Silicon Valley culture, you should watch it. It's supposed to be a satire, but it's really, I think, one of the most accurate things that you're gonna see. And one of my favorite things in the show, and I run into this all the time interviewing entrepreneurs in the Valley, is the main character. He's got this little company, and they're starting a compression algorithm, something or other, and he keeps saying, this compression algorithm is going to change the world. And you hear that a lot from Silicon Valley companies and tech companies in general, that there is this desire to change the world through software, through hardware, through technology in general. My opening question to all of you is, are we changing the world as California? Are we innovating enough when it comes to healthcare, to education, to aerospace, to everything that is so crucial to the economy? There's this great quote from Peter Thiel, an investor and entrepreneur, one of your investors, where he said, we wanted flying cars, and instead we got 140 characters. He's referring to Twitter, of course. So let's start out with that. Maybe you could start, Brett, but just give us the state of the state in your point of view.
Oh, boy. Well, it's interesting. We could be the ones that gave you the flying cars if we really were focused on that. We're actually focused on bringing a whole group of people like this up to Mars. So I do believe that we are on our way to changing the world. And I'm very excited that we're doing that in California. I think my concern is, that I want to see more of it. Mm-hmm. And certainly in Southern California, I'd like to see more of what's happening up in Northern California. I think we're doing a good job in certain pockets, but I agree with the comment. We need to stay vigilant in that regard, related to innovation. My boss, Elon Musk, certainly believes in changing the world in a lot of different ways. And he's not too shy about it, so probably a lot of people here have heard about how we're going to do that. but certainly revolutionizing the way aerospace is done, and whether it's making rockets reusable, whether it's taking mankind up to, or I should say U.S. astronauts specifically right now, up to the International Space Station again on U.S. rockets for the first time in a number of years instead of having the Russians fly us up there. And then working on how to take mankind to Mars in our lifetime are certainly exciting topics, but I think there's a number of other things to be done as well.
Okay. Gil, do you want to?
Yeah, well, first of all, I absolutely loved this HBO show, Silicon Valley, but it has made it more difficult to present to, let's say, investors, look them in the eye, and explain that we're creating Factual, this amazing data company, to change the world, because it was parodied to such a degree. But the truth is, the best companies, I think, really do look at the technologies that they're building it's beyond just solving a pain that some enterprise customer feels that you can charge for. They really do believe that they are disrupting or improving or fundamentally changing the way that people interact or people think, changing the perception of how decisions are made in the case, in terms of the kinds of businesses we're building. So I mean, I think that's fundamental to the frame of mind of many entrepreneurs in California, and it's somewhat unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I can, I think we may be changing the world, but I think in a lot of ways we actually represent the world. I think we represent the diversity of population, the collision, in a nice way mostly, of cultures, of people. And as such, the kind of thing that comes out of here really tend to bring with them a passion that does reflect that kind of thing. Yeah, we are going to change the world. We are going to impact what's around us. So I think that we have that. I think that's part of just the nature of the kind of diversity that we have.
Well, give just, because some people may not be familiar with what you do and what your organization does, but give just one example of this collision idea and how that can change things. Like you mentioned the subway system pilot that you have.
Yeah, so in New York City, I don't know if you guys have heard, but we've just announced that we're going to be delivering 1 gig broadband to everybody throughout New York. And for us, that is an opportunity actually to engage diverse populations by giving them access to the internet, to the means of communication, the means of information. And we're really excited about that, because for us, that's actually a really unique and distinct way that not only are we changing the world in a way that I would say, Ed Moses in New York changed it when he brought highways. Mm-hmm. But we're doing it through that. So
information.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, let's bring it back to LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It's funny. I'm a father of a 4th generation Californian, if you will, and I think of California. I think Mike Milken actually said it last night. What California does, almost everybody else will eventually do, maybe for better or for worse. And oftentimes, what starts in California goes all across the entire world. And if you think just in terms of Los Angeles, I'm going to quote Gil. Gil said yesterday that LA is always slightly ahead. And if you continue the theme, Los Angeles right now is having a moment. It's having a moment in a long series of moments where, innovation, change, leading the future, figuring out the future of the city, transportation, technology, communications, all these things. California has traditionally been, at least in my experience, and I've lived and worked all over the world, the place that everybody references. And all of us up here on the stage have been lucky enough to work for companies that have literally changed the world. Mm-hmm. And so I see no reason for that not to continue.
So that's also a good segue to talking about talent and the competition for talent, because obviously a lot of not just young entrepreneurs, but college graduates and people in general, that they want to come and they want to work here because they do feel like there are opportunities to change the world, to have impact. Do you, in your respective organizations, what are the challenges currently with recruiting, despite the fact that it is still such a mecca for talent? What are the challenges, and how are you answering those challenges? Brett?
Well, I can start. Certainly recruiting is one of the biggest challenges in our company. We're growing, at a pretty incredible pace still right now, 30% plus year over year type of thing for a number of years in a row.
How many people are you currently?
We have about 4,000 employees, over 3,000 in California. Our manufacturing headquarters are in California, so it's a pretty diverse mix of, what we're hiring for, whether it's folks out for the factory floor, or whether it's software or hardware or, mechanical or aerospace, across the gambit. And recruiting is certainly challenging when you start to put the fingers out to all the top universities, for example, in the country. One of the issues that definitely comes up when you're talking to top talent is the cost of living in Los Angeles. And so it's an interesting dynamic. It's probably not one I can solve in our topic here, but it's one that we do need to address because when you factor in the housing and then you factor in the tax structure and you look at where pockets of innovation are starting to occur both around the world and in the U.S., we really need to put a focus not only in the LA area but really in all of California about making sure that we can continue to be competitive in recruiting the top talent. I think LA is an interesting dynamic in some fronts in that for us on the aerospace side we get to leverage all of the history of aerospace in Southern California. There's just an incredibly rich history of aerospace in Southern California. But the other side of it is on the tech side, as far as competing with probably some of the folks up here in my panel, on the software side, for example, it's challenging oftentimes in LA because they can go to Silicon Valley right out of school and there's so many different opportunities. I think the Silicon Beach, concept that we're starting and really are starting to push in that Venice and Santa Monica area is fantastic. I'd like to see more of that because I think candidates like to come into a situation where, there are a lot of different things going on in LA, and that ecosystem that you certainly see in Silicon Valley related to technology is starting to build out, but we need to focus on that.
I just want to say real quick though, if you're having a hard time recruiting and you get to tell people we're going to send you to Mars, that's depressing.
It is challenging, yeah.
Yeah. But I think what SpaceX is doing is just amazing, and all the more power.
Thank
and
you.
I think that the idea that we have these great companies like Factual and SpaceX here in Southern California is fabulous. I'm going to call out somebody who's in the audience, but Amy Amsterdam at the LA Economic Development Corporation did a project on the tech economy. There was a report that was introduced at the beginning of something called Innovation Week, which showed that the tech economy in Los Angeles was just a hair within the distance of the very famous creative economy. It's not obviously Silicon Valley, wherever that is and whatever the boundaries are, is much, much larger. But if you look at LA compared with all the other metropolitan areas, whether it be New York or Boston, Cambridge, we have this incredible tech economy. Our problem is that 60% of the engineers who come from these great universities, Caltech, USC, and of course UCLA, tend to leave the area. And I think that we need more of an economy to retain those engineers, because we certainly have all the ingredients here.
So what can you do from the city's perspective to make sure that happens?
Well, I think that we have a Mayor's Office of Economic Development. We have Michelle Garakian, who's working day and night to help educate and work with the tech industry. And we have other folks across that group who are working with different industries, whether it's biomedical or aerospace or whatever. And so, very much focused on things like business tax reform, helping companies move to Los Angeles and so on. But perhaps most importantly is to increase the awareness that there is this incredible, vibrant set of communities here in Los Angeles. They may be behind the palm trees and all the spectacular TV shows and everything else. But there's more doctorates, more people with PhDs running around this area than anywhere else in the country. And increasing that awareness is one of the core things that I think that we have to do as an entire group of people. So California is fantastic. Silicon Valley is fantastic. I love all of California. But the thing about Southern California is we have to increase the awareness that there's an awful lot of good.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very big part of it, is that there's a sense, again, and I happen to love that show.
We have a lot of fans.
That show is very different if it's in Southern California, right? It's very different if it's in LA. I moved to LA from New York. I started a game company in LA 17 years ago. I've done a bunch of stuff since. But the interesting thing was that as you come here, it was really about, again, this collaboration of people who are coming from very different places. And from very different places, you have engineers, you have artists, you have filmmakers, you have screenwriters, and at least within the context of what I was doing, that was part of the excitement. That was part of the ability of actually keeping people around who are interested in exploring that diversity and building from that diversity. And I think it's a really, it's very unique. I have to say, when I moved here, my sense of LA was not that. And I think, there could be a branding issue, and I think I've heard that throughout the day. In general, I might just that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of people coming together, and you really are not aware of that.
And a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think there's a little bit of a misconception that Silicon Valley companies are what they are because there are beanbags and various kind of perks that you find in a lot of your run-of-the-mill Valley companies. And I think it's beyond that. There's so much about the organization of the company and having, again, it all goes back to innovation. And if you work for Facebook, and if you're an intern at Facebook, you get to build products, This isn't an internship where you're there pushing papers and doing whatever, getting coffee for someone. And there is that accountability and kind of autonomy and not a lot of hierarchy in these companies. So I'm just wondering, what do you think companies that are outside of technologies, and forget Silicon Beach competing with Silicon Valley, but companies that are totally outside of technology, what can they take away from tech companies in order to be more attractive to millennials especially, and to have a culture of innovation?
Well, I had this tremendous experience for almost 4 years at Google, where I learned about how they built this culture of risk-taking and innovation, and I think that notion has spread.
And I should just add, for those who don't know, that you sold your company to Google, and became a small little piece of their technology called AdSense.
We became a
Small little piece.
Yeah.
And so I had the privilege of our company became Google Los Angeles, and we grew that, and that was terrific. But what I most took away from that was just understanding how to build this very specific type of culture where, and you see it in other companies as well. You hear Mark Zuckerberg talking about their culture of move fast and break things. What it means is that it's okay to take risks. You can be rewarded for taking risks. I think one thing that maybe doesn't get talked about a lot is the importance of data in trying to come up with new ideas. A lot of times decisions are made sort of by the top brass based on intuition. And I think in these risk-taking companies, oftentimes somebody gets to try an experiment. They show the data, they show that something works, even though it didn't seem on the surface that it was going to make sense. And if you let the data tell the story, then even somebody who's an intern, like you said, who just tried something out, at these companies, it's just shocking how oftentimes even an intern or a first year, just a recent college grad, gets to build something that gets pushed and becomes live and really gets to, and that's where the source of the innovation is. It's from the fringes. Tried to build a company similarly that is very much all about flexibility and rewarding that sort of risk taking.
I mean, it's funny because I completely agree with Gil, and one of the very first things that Mayor Eric Garcetti did was that he created an executive directive, number 3, so really, really early on, around open data, in which he asked all the departments, and remember, the city government of Los Angeles is very much of a hierarchical structure, right? And yet the open data movement required that all these different departments and agencies publish their data. It's available at data.lacd.org. Anybody can use it. And we have seen other departments using it left and right. And so Gil's point about actually just simply surfacing the data leads to a lot of innovation, even inside of places like, well, public governments. And it's fascinating. And there's no question that it's incredibly powerful.
And you think that that's something that non-tech companies can also can use, just that opening up of data and pooling, also sharing information?
Well, everybody here knows the old adage, information is power. Well, what happens if you take that information and you start to put it into the hands of everybody? Even the most unexpected places can then use information to do unexpectedly good things. And that's what we've been saying everywhere. I think it's fair to say that you built your company on that idea.
Yeah. So it's scary because information is also transparency. It shines a light on all the problems. The beauty of open source software is that it is so open. It's so robust because the problems are transparent, there's so many eyeballs on it, and that it's a self-correction mechanism. So the real leadership I think that non-tech companies need, and we have seen this, is the more transparency, the more likely it is that your own people or partners are going to help you become a better organization.
You haven't lived until you've had the newspaper literally across the street from you, asking you questions about your data. But here's the thing, though. Innovation is oftentimes an act of bravery, right? Which is to go and say, okay, we need to change, we need to do something, we need to create something new, we need to think a different way. And that's risk. That's taking on something. In California is great because it's always continuously changing, right? We're always forced to deal with it.
And
I think that also answers your question, your earlier question about how do you maintain staff, how do you maintain people who are interested in the work they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? The more transparency there is, and like the more access you have to data, the more access you have to information, the more you understand what you're actually a part of.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's actually, I'm sorry, it's actually, it's a big shift that has happened that I think is a huge influence of tech industry in general, is that we're not so much top-down, rule by edict, but actually it's about, what makes sense, how do you actually make it happen?
I was just thinking how Elon Musk is probably one of the bravest entrepreneurs because the failures, the early failures that turned into successes were probably some of the most tremendous, obviously very transparent because those explosions you can see them for miles.
Yes.
You can't hide those.
Yes.
But I think that transparency can be seen in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that I've noticed repeatedly in companies that I cover, it's easy to do when you're a startup, but they keep doing it as they grow. Is they have these, like, a lot of them do Fridays, lunches with the CEO and founder, and it's just this all hands, like anybody, they give a little presentation on, very casual, on where things are at, what they're working on, what the priorities are, and then anybody in the company can ask questions directly to the CEO. And this is something that's done, it's surprising, but they've really a lot of companies have kept up with this, and maybe now they have to do it by video conference because they have this very distributed workforce, but it's another aspect of transparency. So on the flip side, there's a lot of good to sharing information, but then there is a lot of risk also with IP theft, and we're constantly, security in general has just become such a hot topic. So I'm just wondering, how much time do you, in your respective organizations, spend worrying about IP theft and security, and how much of an impediment is that to innovation, if at all?
Wow.
You probably have a lot of IP you want to protect, I'm sure.
Yes. Certainly, it's a hot topic for us. We have a whole group that just focuses on that. It's an interesting dynamic coming from semiconductors where you knew who your competitors were and you could fight it out in the market. Really, it's unique for us in that we're fighting nation states. And so, security is, it's taken to a whole new level for us. And so it becomes not just a cybersecurity, but really focusing on physical security in certain areas as well. So I would say it's definitely a decent percentage of what we focus on, and will continue to be.
And you have a chief security officer?
We do within our IT organization. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If executive directive number 3 from the mayor was about open data, executive directive number 2 set up a cyber intrusion command center, was focused on cybersecurity. And if you think about the city of Los Angeles, just the entirety, right? 44% of the US economy comes through the ports, the airport, the Department of Water and Power, the streets, all 4,500 traffic lights, intersections are controlled by a computer. And so security is less about intellectual property, and both of us have worked for Qualcomm, but more in the case of a city, it's literally about security. It's about everything. And so, it takes on really interesting aspects when you think about the actual day-to-day livability, safety, and everything else for a city. And so the CICC, as we call it, is this really interesting connection between the FBI, the Secret Service, the LAPD, the port police, the IT organizations across the entire city, and so on. And probably for the first time in really any really large city, we're thinking of it comprehensively because it is so important.
But do you worry that it will be at a point that it will kind of put a dent in innovation or slow down innovation? Because cities are doing all these great things, and companies, there's wearables, and there's tracking, there's sensors everywhere, there's the Internet of Things, and it's leading to a lot of great innovation, but at the same time,
but there's
a risk to it.
There's always this tension, right? Security is not the same thing as privacy, and innovation doesn't necessarily have to be stopped because of security. The Department of Transportation put out a request for information for everybody to come give us input on what we should do literally with all of these, the entire traffic management system and the entire parking system, which, by the way, is kind of amazing if you think about it, because the future of connected cars and autonomous cars and everything else. But innovation often happens best when there are at least some bounds around it, and security is important to us all. But that's not the reason not to do something. So,
Any thoughts on the security front?
yeah.
Or privacy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did spend some time at Google.
Yeah. For the most part, our mode has been one of building open ecosystems of data. So for example, we're much more open with our database. There are other companies that have come before us that have databases of every location on Earth. That's one of our core pieces of our intellectual property. But yet we have an open freemium API that anybody from anywhere in the world can sign up for and start running queries and get access to this data. And we found that there's a balance between locking it and siloing it and holding onto it tightly, and building partnerships with we have thousands of companies using our APIs. A lot of that has actually led to sharing back into our database as the hub. I mean, if we had really held onto it too tightly, it would actually have prevented partnerships from forming organically. And now, like I said, we're getting just massive amounts of contribution from companies all over the place. So there's a certain degree of risk we had to take to have a more open platform. It's paid off for us. That being said, we're careful with our software and IP. That's important. We take the standard precautions around.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense, right? It's from a data point of view, and especially when you look at the municipal level and the public level, the data should be available, right? People should be able to go and explore it and find creative ways to manipulate it and do interesting things with it, hopefully. Some of them may also include creating unique IP, because it's the way you're dealing and manipulating the data. But the data itself should be open, as long as clearly should be anonymized. It should be, be respectful of privacy, et cetera. But from the point of view of the data itself, have it available. Let clever people imagine what can be done with it.
Right. From a privacy standpoint, we have separate products that have data about how people are moving around through partnerships, and we're understanding those patterns of behavior. It's very valuable. With that kind of data, you have to take very seriously, think through your privacy policies very carefully, make sure that you're following them, that you have a culture internally of protecting this data, and making sure that you don't have any approaches that would allow the private data to leak. We make sure not to retain any PII, email addresses, phone numbers, things like that can tie data back to a single person.
But,
yeah.
I think the thing about privacy, security, and open data, the tensions and everything else around this, and we can start throwing in other things like net neutrality and so on. To bring it back to California, what we do here, the way that we all figure it out, is going to be influential from the entire rest of the world. And so it's good for us to have this entire conversation. It's really important. And I think that California, ultimately, we will figure it out. And hopefully everybody will be in a good place for it. And what we do here will likely be referenced everywhere.
Yeah, you see some struggles going on in this whole new economy that's sprouted up with the Ubers, not to pick on Uber anymore, but Uber and Airbnb, and these are companies. A lot of these companies started here in California, and they have regulatory fights across the U.S. and across the world in some cases, but a lot of that has originated here. Do you see those as really big areas of innovation, everything that's going on that front? It's so disruptive to the way to the status quo in all of these industries.
I think to me, the most interesting element of disruption for a business like Uber is that people actually want to share. They want this business that's helping them with their daily lives to know where they are, where they're going, where they're likely to go. The more predictive, the better. I mean, I'm sure Uber is doing interesting things where they are
doing interesting things.
you twisted that. But that they're probably predicting demand tomorrow. They may know better than you do if you're going to dinner on Friday night, because maybe I'm spontaneous about should we go out, but it's possible that they're looking at patterns of behavior where they can actually make predictions better than humans. So I mean, and there's incredible value there if they can make transportation more efficient. And it's all about the user being delighted with the service and wanting to share of themselves, of our data, I think. And generally, the trend is completely that direction.
Well, and I think the Uber example is, there are lots of different issues around Uber, but one of the things that Uber is doing is that it's forcing everybody else to compete, right? And so you're now able to call up a taxi cab using any number of different apps, as an example. So the taxi industry, which has been pretty stable for a long time, is now reacting by, offering digital services, in reaction to this new entrant. And so, again, competition, innovation, risk, all these things sort of go hand in hand. So.
I'm going to switch gears and bring the topic to education, because that's obviously also very top of mind. And we heard earlier about the UC Regents moving to increase tuition by up to 5% for the next 5 years. Obviously, the education piece is something that's so near and dear to technology's heart. And my question is, why are we not seeing more innovation, technological innovation, and more wide-stream adoption of new ways of educating people, young people especially? I mean, we have companies that have sprouted out like Udacity and Coursera, and a lot of interesting kind of experiments going on. And there are more and more tech companies that are looking beyond the college degree, and especially, which college you went to, especially as there is such competition for talent. So do you think that we could be doing a lot more in innovating, because it seems like the prices are just going to keep going up and up, and yet we've got all these technologies where we could be teaching, huge numbers of new entrants to the workforce?
But, so let me just challenge you just slightly on this, which is that I think that there's, I went to University of California, I went to UCLA, and I teach at USC, and those are big established institutions. Yet I found myself last night, I was playing around with a little maker product from Intel, competition for us in some ways, right? But what was interesting about it was that I was trying to figure out how to use a little tiny board that they had produced, a Galileo, and I found myself looking online at their documentation and watching videos to figure out how to actually program the thing. And I'm not the youngest guy in the world, but here I am using these forms of education that didn't exist at the time that I was in school. And so education may continue, and I think we are seeing lots of innovative change in education. Hasn't affected everything yet, but I'm still finding myself being educated in interesting ways.
I haven't seen a lot of institutions partnering with some of these new upstarts. I mean, there's a little bit of that going on, and I think San Jose State has partnered with Udacity, maybe. I might have that wrong, but I'm not seeing it as a really viable mainstream option yet, and it seems like the technology is there.
Right.
So what do you think is the hurdle?
Well, I know that the education issue is a big one for us, and really it comes back to STEM for us, because we're just not getting the number of engineers out.
STEAM now, I think.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Throw the arts in there as well. But certainly when we're focused on hiring hundreds of engineers at a time, and they're just not coming out at the pace we need to, it became a hot topic for us. And so really we're starting as a company to even try and get down to the local schools before kids even head off to college, with the idea that show them how exciting an engineering career and engineering future can be, and then we take it to the universities that are close by, USC being one of them, because I went to USC as well, or I know you teach there, I think is what you said. But and getting involved in their curriculum and getting involved in some of the programs they're doing, whether it's their rocketry program or their some of the other ones they're working on, and I think trying to can encourage more and more to have those kids, at a younger and younger age, continue to be excited about innovation and about what they could do to change the future. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, we did the Mayor's Summer of Learning where people could earn online badges it was patterned after the Chicago one, where people could earn stuff, earn online badges for achievements that they accomplished educationally over the summer. And then we're watching all these really interesting companies like 2-Bit Circus and so on really focus on STEAM education, oriented younger and younger and younger. And so I think that we'll see the benefits over the coming years. So.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more of it. I'm like, just as a complete anecdote, I have an 11-year-old son at his school, which is LAUSD. He goes to LACES. He actually has a robotics class, right? Which was extremely exciting to us because there's really, you kind of do your basics, but really, what are the practical applications of all these things? And I think that, as you said, I'm like, if you can start getting kids involved earlier, the possibilities are immense. I have to say, they are using, within the context of their classes, probably the same videos you were looking at, Peter, just to try to understand things. So the resources are there. So, possibly the question maybe is an earlier question to me, which is, a lot of the stuff is available. The question is, how do we give people access to it, right? How do we make sure that you have accessibility to all these things that are out in the world? How do you have access to, high speed, hyper connectivity, so to speak, right? How do you then collect that data and actually use it to collect insights about what are the things that cities, people, education actually needs? And I think that we still have a gap overall, I think in terms of between different populations, right? In terms of access to those really basic resources that we need in order to maintain that sense of diversity, innovation, excitement about new things.
Yeah, I think there's certain tools that are available that we don't quite use yet because of the perception of what's okay. Maybe it's a question of what's politically correct. But here, a quick story. I invested in a company called Kaggle. They do data prizes. One of their prizes was, can a data scientist write a piece of software that can grade an essay more accurately than your average teacher? It's not so politically correct to talk about it, but
slightly controversial.
But somebody won, right? So then the obvious
the
algorithm won. Man versus machine. So it's going to be more accurate. It's more likely to get the correct score. So then the obvious backlash is this just doesn't feel right. We need humans to teach. But the really interesting thing that I learned about this and I heard about this was, well, if you want a good writer, you need to write a lot. But teachers only have so much time to grade. If you had an automated technique for grading, you could have kids write every day, and the teacher can just grade, once a week or once every 2 weeks, which is all they have time for. So I mean, it's a question of using technology, having it do what it's good at, doing it at scale, and it's consistent. And I just thought that was an interesting story and opportunity.
Well, so I know a lot of you kind of brought it back to needing to start earlier in teaching STEM and STEAM and access to information, of course, across all demographics. But today, I mean, would you, in your companies and the city of LA, would you hire someone who does not have a college degree?
Well,
could you and would you?
The city does. I mean, if you think about public safety, for example, fire and police, for example, a lot of these folks, they don't necessarily have a college degree, but they get well-trained, incredibly well-trained within those departments, and then they become, some of the best in the country, maybe the world, at what they do. But for other places, there's no question that I think we, both on the public side and the private side and everywhere else, need to have this, you can almost draw a string between a well-educated, well-rounded person all the way through, the educational institutions, and then continue that education really forever, because I'd be willing to bet that on this panel and maybe across this room, all of us are probably pretty well educated, but probably very few of us are doing exactly what we thought we were going to do when we were, let's say, 12. So.
You didn't think you would be here on this panel? What about you, Brett?
Well, certainly we get the opportunity to give a little different perspective, I would say, and that is that, we have manufacturing going on in California.
That's right.
We'll get to that, too.
Unfortunately, that's a little unique, and it needs to change. Actually, that can't be unique. But by allowing that to be the case, we've been able to hire 1,000+ folks that don't have college degrees, and it's been a tremendous impact on the local community. And really, what we're able to do is offer people well-paying jobs and full career opportunities without a college education. And oftentimes we'll work with, local tech schools and trade schools, to make sure that they get additional skills in machining or composites or whatever it may be to help that along. But, that's really one of the huge advantages of maintaining that industrial base and that manufacturing capability, because to be perfectly honest with you, people can make a great living, 6-figure salaries and everything else, and not have had that education as long as we continue to have that available to people. I don't think that college is necessarily the right answer for everybody, and I think we've swung a long ways the other way now of kind of making it such that folks feel like they have to take that avenue, and that's the only avenue available. So I'm excited that we can give people a different path that is still a great path for them.
Well, and one of your, just going to mention that one of your investors, going back to Peter Thiel, started a fund for college dropouts for entrepreneurs who are, and a lot of them are Ivy League dropouts.
Yes.
So
I think that's great, but, and it's a big but. I think the question of the 5% increase is not a question of, will I hire or not hire somebody who has a college degree? It's a question of access, right? It's a question of the ability to go and get an education. It's not a question, yes, there are people who, I would hire someone if they're qualified, they can do a good job, et cetera. I'm like, but the issue of education, it's an issue of, we need to offer access to education, right? It should not be a question. It should simply be what it is, and we should figure out a way to make it affordable.
Well, there's
I think there's a better chance of.
For those that want it, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
There's an issue here in LA, specifically in Los Angeles, and I think it's true for many parts of the world, which is that LA has a number of digital divides, and the mayor is very specific to use the plural. So, for example, we're second from the bottom in the state in terms of access to and use of the internet, and that's something that has to be addressed. The tech industry is sort of famously not as diverse as the population, and I'm being polite about it. I've worked for a number of companies which are, very gender majority.
And just to give some perspective, Cisco, for example, just released their diversity numbers. They've been doing it for a number of years, and it's very consistent with a lot of tech companies, which is, theirs was, I think, 77% male. And then when you're talking about ethnic minorities, it's in the low, well, for Black and Hispanic, it's low single digits.
But,
so just to give some.
But I think that the work that people are doing around STEAM, for example, has just huge potential benefits for all of us. LA is this huge, diverse city and region, and I don't know how many languages are spoken here, but it's in the hundreds, right? And just on my way downtown, I go through at least 10 different cultures. And towards that end, we have to, not only improve the access to education, a lot of that education comes, digitally these days, and that means in great part that we have to address, these digital divides. So.
No doubt.
Yeah, there's some tremendous organizations out there doing great work, inspiring young kids to be interested in STEAM. I took my family to the STEAM Carnival. Did you go to the STEAM Carnival? It was unbelievable demonstration of all sorts of interesting ideas and technologies and things that people can touch and robots.
Is that like the Maker Faire?
It was similar to that idea.
Yeah. Two-bit circus down at the harbor. It was brilliant. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that.
Going back to, you mentioned earlier, you brought up manufacturing.
Yeah.
How have you been, and it's funny, we were talking about this also, that we call it Silicon Valley and Silicon Beach down here, and there's no, well, you can make a lot of jokes about down here, what you could call it, but a different kind of silicone. But anyways, how have you been able to keep manufacturing here?
You know, it's interesting.
Partly, at least.
It was certainly Elon from the very beginning believing that the advantage that he would gain from an efficiency of the overall organization of having the engineer right by the factory was more advantageous than the additional cost of having manufacturing in California. And so he took that, and ran with it both at SpaceX and at Tesla, right, where they manufacturing the cars, up in Fremont. And it is incredible to watch, an engineer be able to make a change and go out and follow it the next day through the machine shop and watch that part, getting put on the rocket within the same week. And now with the way innovation's going, it's headed out to the 3D printer and it's printing up, and the next day they're grabbing the part and testing it out. And so that was really, the give was we knew it was going to be more expensive, and then the take was we thought we could still, overcome that with the additional efficiency that was gained.
Yeah. Hey, we have an entrepreneur in residence by the name of Z Holly, who's terrific, who's focused on manufacturing in the maker community. And what's really interesting, and here's a little secret, which is that the #1 manufacturing area in the country is actually Los Angeles. It's just not the really large manufacturers. It's all the small shops and everything else. You start to think of the maker community and garments and fashion. You start to think about these little companies that may not have hundreds and hundreds of employees. And then you start to think about the technological changes that are coming, such as 3D printing and all the other really accessible CAD and everything else. And the potentials are really pretty fabulous.
So you think there could be a little bit of a revival, but on a smaller scale with the whole maker movement? And
absolutely. I mean, I think that look at the whole discussion around wearables. My personal feeling is that wearables will take off when they become fashionable. And it's a perfect thing for a place like California and certainly in Los Angeles to really focus on.
Do you think it matters really that big manufacturing is not so much a part of our economy anymore, now that there's the whole concept of software is eating the world, and a lot of companies are so easy to build without really any, you've got Amazon Web Services and all this stuff going on, but you don't need a lot of upfront costs. You don't need to necessarily be manufacturing hardware. What do you think? Gil?
I mean, I think more about manufacturing innovation. We manufacture data. I mean, all these other industries need exactly the same kinds of disruptions that Henry Ford brought with assembly lines and all the revolutions the Japanese brought with quality controls at every step. I mean, there's whole new industries that you might not call manufacturing, but that's what I think about.
Okay.
Yeah, I would actually suggest that software is taking the world, but I think that hardware is in a place where there's opportunities for new hardware to actually, chips are available, boards are available. There's a lot of stuff that can be done outside of what used to be actually immense costs. And I think there's a lot of innovation. I think you see that within the context of what Peter mentioned in terms of wearables. There's a lot of stuff happening in terms of just personal connectivity. So I think that there are opportunities around a combination of hardware, software, and the manufacturing associated with that. So I actually think that there's a potential revival there. You see a lot of that in the context of the maker community, but I think it can go much more mainstream than that.
I mean, Silicon Valley lost. I mean, they used to manufacture chips, and then they haven't for about 3 decades, and it hasn't really stopped them from hiring people.
Yeah, you can go and buy any chip you want, get it in, and start making stuff.
What's a very general question, but what's one policy change that you would like to see in the state of California that would directly affect your business, and whether it's on the tax side or immigration, we haven't really touched, or education or anything else that comes to mind? Do you want to start, Gil?
Policy questions. I mean, mostly, I worry if there's the right pool of talent here, and I think, and I'm happy with it. I mean, that's why I'm here in LA. I don't think as much about policy issues. I hope LA continues to be the place where people want to come. Right now, we're certainly, California and LA are net importers of talent from all the other states in the nation. I mean, I don't have the exact statistics, but we're hiring people from a lot of other states, and they want to come here, and that makes it much easier to fill positions and to find engineering talent. So I certainly pay attention to a lot of the things that other panelists are talking about in terms of making LA, for example, an increasingly livable place with a wonderful river that the community can enjoy and transportation that works. I mean, these are the most important infrastructure questions that will ensure that people want to come to LA next decade.
So everything's perfect in your view of the world? No. What about
Hallelujah. I think we actually as a company, we do a fair amount of, or some work with the public sector and then actually in transportation. I think that one of the things is really to find new efficiencies. And I think it was mentioned earlier, for public-private collaboration. And I think that current structures make it at times very difficult for small companies to engage in what are public projects. And I think there's a lot of room for innovation within that context.
Do you think it's a perception problem or a real problem?
I think it's somewhat real. I think that there's a lot of willingness for collaboration, but I think that when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of how does it fit, that's when things start getting a little squirrely. So I think kind of dealing with those issues or offering ways to streamline those collaboration may be, I think, very powerful.
Brett?
Wow. Make sure that I don't say anything on a policy side that'll come back to haunt me. I think we, as Californians, need to make sure that we stay very competitive in the bake-offs for companies looking to expand and looking for where their large manufacturing facilities or other facilities are going to be located. Because we should all know that other states, and other countries for that matter, are incredibly aggressive at coming in and trying to get some of this innovative talent out of California. And we don't want that to happen, right? We want to make sure that we maintain and grow our core competencies here. So I think when we look at policy changes, emphasizing that, and I know the LAEDC has been leading that charge in a lot of areas, and I appreciate that, but I think emphasizing that is something we should probably do more.
And maybe have kept Tesla completely in-house?
Yeah, no comment, but of course.
Any thoughts?
Ooh, dangerous question. So I'm going to limit it just to personal comments and also just focus on the innovation and tech side, because I can't speak, the city can't speak about the state. But the things that California are doing that I think are really terrific, if you look at the Governor's Office of Business, for example, what they're doing with the innovation hubs and centers across the state is fantastic. I hope the state of California always remembers that our education, or the things like the University of California and so on, are just part of the really big reasons why California is so successful. And I always look at, how do we make our infrastructure, and increasingly our digital infrastructure, as good as the best in the world. And if we can do those things, I mean, California is the place where everybody competes with. Governors come here to try to take things away from us.
Yes.
So.
One other question to each of you. Can you name one technology that is either being worked on or is available today, but that you think is, and it can't be something that your company creates, that you think really has the potential to truly be world-changing? I'm going to start with you this time.
Oh, cool.
Mix it up.
Cities don't produce technology. I will say that, but if you think of the city as a platform, it's pretty amazing, right? The city itself is an interoperable thing that we all interact with on so many different levels, whether it's an airport or interacting with the parking or the transportation or whatever, right? The water and power. But I will say one thing is that I think communications, in the form of internet and wireless and wired communications, are transformative, because we have so much more power with these things to affect the user experience of being in the city today than we've ever had in really all of history. So.
Okay. Brett?
Wow, I want to talk about SpaceX, but I won't.
I could for you if you want.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of things I could put on there, but then I'll go to Tesla. I think if you look at the new Tesla that came out, that's well on its way to a self-driving vehicle. I think there's a chance that when you look out 20 years, it will be the minority that are driving their own cars, and the majority will just let.
Sorry to interrupt you. There's this great quote from Mark Andreessen, venture capitalist. He said that 10 years from now, we'll look back and think we were completely insane to ever let a human being get behind the wheel. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I've driven with my kids, so.
So transportation,
so it could very well
kind of
be.
generally.
I think transportation will see a new, significant change. Yeah, whether it's on the electrical, drivetrain, or whether it's on driving itself.
Okay, great. David?
I would say...
You can use one of theirs also.
I can.
They're taking
Thank you. I
all
was
the
like,
good
I need
ones.
to come up with something original right now that will change the world. I would actually, I would echo what Peter said in terms of communication and the ability to provide ubiquitous communication and ubiquitous access as a way for communities and ideas to develop, to really form, and to really, democratize the ability to connect.
Okay.
So building a little bit on what Peter was saying about these devices, there are soon going to be futuristic sensors in there that are collecting much more information, and I think probably the industry that's ripest for disruption, something certainly we're not working on, is the healthcare industry. XPRIZE, that's, we're proud that XPRIZE is headquartered here in the Los Angeles area. They have the Qualcomm Tricorder Prize, where somebody, I feel confident, will win this prize over the next couple years, and will build a handheld device that, I picked on teachers, and I'll pick on doctors, that can do a better job than a board-certified doctor can in diagnosing quickly 15 different diseases. Maybe we have enough doctors, possibly, in this country. I don't even know if that, but there's no question that throughout the rest of the world they don't have enough, and these devices are going to be incredibly transformative to that industry, just for starters.
Great. All really great ideas that hopefully will come to fruition. Thank you guys so much. We're about out of time, so I just really want to thank you, and thank all of you also for sticking around and hearing us out. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For a wonderful closing panel, for a great day, and thank you all for being with us. And I would like to invite each and all of you to join us outside on the patio for a reception for a few minutes. And on your way out, feel free, if you'd like, to take a copy of our latest State Science and Technology Index, which is on the table by the door. So again, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you at other events, and have a great day. Bye-bye.